Just in the last quarter, the iPhone maker's sales in China fell by 13% on a yearly basis.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. European Union's foreign policy chief Joseph Borrell says Israel is provoking famine and using starvation as a weapon of war in Gaza. Israel's foreign minister dismisses the accusations. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev says his country is closer than ever to a peace deal with Armenia. NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg welcomes the talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Afghanistan's Taliban claims Pakistan carried out 2 strikes on its territory, killing 5 women and 3 children. Pakistan's army disputes this claim, saying it struck Taliban militants in an air raid. Unidentified gunmen kill 16 troops from the Nigerian army in the oil-rich southern state of Delta. President Bola Tinubu orders a military operation in the region. The Colombian government suspends a truce deal with Estado Mayor Centro after rebels attacked an indigenous group, killing at least 1 and wounding several others. We begin with Russia, where the polls have officially closed, and no surprises, Vladimir Putin has secured a 5th term in office. In a record post-Soviet landslide, Putin won 88% of the vote, cementing his already tight grip on power. Now, Vladimir Putin has ruled Russia since the turn of the century, either as president or prime minister. And the 2024 results brought an even larger victory for Putin. His rule until at least 2030, securing a 3rd full decade of rule.
First of all, I want to thank the citizens of Russia. We are all one team. All the citizens that came out to polling stations and voted. Once again, I want to say this is very important. This has no formal character. The source of authority in the nation is the Russian people.
Now, in his first speech after victory, Putin has warned the West of a 3rd world war. The Russian president said a direct conflict between Moscow and U.S.-led NATO would mean the planet was on one step away from World War III.
I think that anything is possible in the modern world. But I've already said this, and it is clear to everyone that conflict between Russia and NATO will be just one step away from a full-scale World War III. I don't think anybody is interested in this. NATO military are present in Ukraine. We know this. We heard the French speech there and the English speech. There's nothing good in this. Firstly for them, because they get killed, that too in large numbers. But at the end of the day, it is not our choice. If somebody wants to cover the internal problems of their countries with their external aggressive rhetoric, well, this is a well-known and widely used trick. I would love France not to play the role, which only escalates the conflict and deepens it, provokes it. But instead, like it was said here before, did something to find ways to peaceful solutions. In this sense, France could play its role, but not all is lost yet.
The Russian president also criticized the United States political system and seemed to back Donald Trump in his legal troubles.
You want to know my opinion regarding whether our elections are democratic or not? I believe they are democratic. And on the contrary, in some countries such as yours, you can consider the use of administrative resources to attack one of the presidential candidates, including courts. We have no preference for any of the candidates for President of the United States of America. We will work with anyone who the voters trust. But the use of administrative resources of the judicial system, well, it has become simply ridiculous and a disgrace to the whole world for the United States. For your democratic, so-called quote-unquote system, I have every reason to believe that today we do not observe any democracy in your country, at least during the election processes, in some Western countries, including the USA.
Now, the landslide victory does provide Putin the rhetorical ammunition as the West is at odds over continued support for Ukraine. Some polling stations in Russia witnessed protests on the final day of voting, and supporters of deceased opposition leader Alexei Navalny called on people to protest against Putin. Now, according to reports, more than 60 Russians were detained across 16 cities on the final day of voting. But with Putin now tightening his grip on power, the room for protest in Russia is likely to shrink even further. And Russia's war in Ukraine could also spell more trouble for its ally, Iran. The G7 is mulling a ban on Iran Air, the country's national carrier, for flying to Europe. The airline flies passengers from Iran to multiple cities across Europe. The United States and its allies have warned that they will slap sanctions on Tehran, including a ban on Iran Air, if it supplies Russia with ballistic missiles. But Iran is undeterred as its officials say a deal with Moscow is in fact imminent. Our next report explains.
The war in the heart of Europe between Russia and Ukraine is in its third year. US-led NATO allies are weighing how to rebuild stockpiles drained by the war. They are struggling to keep up with Ukraine's increasing appetite for arms and ammunition. Russia too has been pumping out weapons. Its ability to churn out tanks, missiles and shells has surprised the West and mounted pressure on the Ukrainian military. But despite its expanding arms production, Russia has been facing major challenges. Moscow too has been struggling to replenish its dwindling supplies. To deal with this, Russia has been receiving support from one of its closest allies, Iran. Russia is reportedly seeking close-range ballistic missiles from Iran for its war in Ukraine, and Iranian officials say a deal is imminent. The United States and its G7 allies warned Iran that major Western economies will pile sanctions on Tehran if it moves forward with the deal to provide ballistic missiles to Russia. These sanctions could include a ban on Iran Air, the country's national air carrier, from flying to Europe. Iran Air flies passengers from Iran to multiple cities across Europe.
As you all know, we have expressed serious concerns from this podium that Russia is seeking to acquire close-range ballistic missiles from Iran to enable its brutal war in Ukraine. And that Russian negotiations to acquire those close-range ballistic missiles have been active and they've been advancing. Today, I just want to call your attention to a joint statement released this morning by the United States and other G7 countries warning Iran not to go forward with the sale of close-range ballistic missiles to Russia. The G7 statement reads in part, and I quote, "Were Iran to proceed with providing ballistic missiles or related technology to Russia, we are prepared to respond swiftly and in a coordinated manner, including with new and significant measures against Iran," end quote. So we're speaking with one voice here on this matter from the United States, Canada, Japan, the EU, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom.
For weeks, the Biden administration has raised alarm over a potential Russia-Iran missiles deal. The US and Europe have already imposed the most extensive and comprehensive sanctions against Iran. Tehran will reportedly provide surface-to-surface ballistic missiles to Moscow for use in Ukraine. These missiles could include those from the Fateh 110 family of short-range ballistic missiles. Reports say Iran has already provided Russia with around 400 of these missiles. These shipments began in early January after multiple meetings between Iranian and Russian military officials that took place last year in Tehran and Moscow. The US is yet to confirm that missiles have moved from Iran to Russia. Washington says Iran has already provided Russia with drones, guided aerial bombs and artillery ammunition that Moscow has used to attack Ukrainian targets. Earlier, Iran had also reportedly developed a new explosive attack drone, the Shahid 107, for Russia.
Well, I can't speak for the mullahs. I wouldn't do that, or for the supreme leader. We know they provided drones, not only drones, the drones themselves, but the ability to manufacture drones organically inside Russia. And this is a burgeoning defense relationship that we've been watching very, very closely. We've talked about it many times here. We haven't seen them move forward other than the negotiation process actively advancing, and we really wanted to set down a marker here for Iran and for Russia, that there will be swift consequences for them to do that. What's in their calculus, I couldn't say. But this would be obviously not just really bad for the people of Ukraine, but also bad for people in the Middle East, because Iran's hoping to get something out of this too. It's not just about sales of ballistic missiles to Russia. They're hoping to get Russian military technology for themselves.
According to reports, Tehran has already sold a few units to Moscow in a deal that is estimated to be worth more than $2 million. Iran has also supplied Russia with Shahid kamikaze drones, which have become a staple of Moscow's long-range assaults on Ukrainian cities. Last year, Iran completed a deal to buy Su-35 fighter jets from Russia. It is also looking to buy advanced military equipment including attack helicopters, combat trainer aircraft and radars. Defense partnership between Iran and Russia has strengthened since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Iran's hardline rulers believe this helps Tehran resist US sanctions and end political isolation.
And now to an update on the Israel-Hamas war. The Israeli military has launched a massive operation in northern Gaza's Al-Shifa Hospital. Israel says it has received concrete intelligence that Hamas terrorists had regrouped inside the hospital and that there were senior Hamas operatives present who were involved in commanding attacks against Israel. Now, Israel's intelligence indicated that Hamas operatives and commanders from the northern Gaza Strip recently arrived at the hospital to use it as a command center.
The IDF is conducting a high-precision operation in limited areas of Shifa Hospital, following concrete intelligence that demanded immediate action. We know that senior Hamas terrorists have regrouped inside the Shifa Hospital and are using it to command attacks against Israel. Our targeted mission isn't just an operational necessity. It's a global imperative.
Now, the Israeli military also claims that the Hamas gunmen opened fire from within the hospital compound. The IDF released footage showing firing from inside the Al-Shifa hospital. The Israeli army also said that operations inside the hospital were precise and humanitarian efforts to secure patients and civilians were currently underway. Tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians have sought shelter inside the Al-Shifa complex.
Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza. We seek no harm to the civilians that Hamas is hiding behind, which is why we will conduct this operation with caution and care, while ensuring that the hospital continues its important functions. For this reason, we have Arabic speakers on the ground so that we can communicate to the patients in the hospital in their own language, and IDF doctors to assist those in need. We will also be conducting a humanitarian effort to provide food, water, and other supplies to the patients and civilians in the hospital compound. There is no obligation for the patients and the medical staff to evacuate the hospital, but there is and will be a passageway for other civilians to exit the hospital. We call upon all Hamas terrorists hiding in hospital Surrender immediately. Medical facilities should never be exploited for terror. Hamas must be held accountable.
Now, Israel says several gunmen were killed and around 80 suspects were in fact captured. The suspects, some of whom Israel says are terrorists, are being questioned by Shin Bet interrogators. Now, the Israeli army had carried out an operation at the Al-Shifa Hospital in November of last year, sparking international outcry. But Israel defended its actions, claiming Hamas was running its operations from hospitals and medical centers. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he will continue with the military campaign against Hamas. And Netanyahu has pushed back fiercely against what he described as international pressure over the war in Gaza. He's also reiterated his determination to send forces into Rafah.
To our friends in the international community, I say, is your memory so short? So quickly you forgot about October 7th, the worst massacre committed against Jews since the Holocaust. So quickly you are ready to deny Israel the right to defend itself against the monsters of Hamas. So quickly you lost your moral compass. Instead of pressuring Israel, who is fighting the most just war against the most cruel enemy, turn your pressure against Hamas and its patron, Iran. They are the ones posing danger to the region and to the whole world. No international pressure will stop us from achieving all the goals of the war. Eliminating Hamas, freeing all of our hostages, and ensuring that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel. In order to do that, we will operate in Rafah too.
Meanwhile, Israel has sent a high-level delegation headed by the Mossad chief to Qatar for talks with Hamas. The aim is to secure the release of 40 hostages in exchange for a 6-week truce in Gaza. The negotiations are expected to last at least 2 weeks. And from the Middle East, we now turn to East Asia. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken attended the Summit for Democracy in South Korea. Secretary Blinken held bilateral talks with his South Korean counterpart in Seoul. America's top diplomat also met South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol. The two leaders discussed the need to strengthen bilateral ties. They also emphasized the importance of democracies working together. Both President Yoon and Secretary Blinken highlighted how authoritarian regimes are using artificial intelligence to undermine democracies.
As authoritarian and repressive regimes deploy technologies to undermine democracy and human rights, we need to ensure that technology sustains and supports democratic values.
Fake news and disinformation based on artificial intelligence and digital technology not only violates individual freedom and human rights, but also threatens democratic systems.
Meanwhile, North Korea fired multiple ballistic missiles as Secretary Blinken arrived in Seoul. South Korean military officials say the missiles were fired from a site near North Korea's capital, Pyongyang. And at least 3 ballistic missiles landed in the Sea of Japan just outside Tokyo's exclusive economic zone. Japan deployed its Coast Guard ships after the missiles landed near its waters. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has called North Korea's missile launches completely unacceptable. Prime Minister Kishida also went on to accuse Kim Jong-Un of threatening peace in the region.
North Korea launched multiple ballistic missiles today. It is estimated that they landed outside the waters of Japan's exclusive economic zone. So far, no damage has been reported. North Korea has repeatedly launched ballistic missiles quite often since the beginning of this year. A series of actions by North Korea threaten the peace and security of our country, the region, and the international community, and are absolutely unacceptable. The latest ballistic missile launch was a violation of related UN resolutions, and we strongly condemn it. We have already lodged a stern protest against North Korea.
Meanwhile, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un congratulated Russian President Vladimir Putin on winning the presidential election. In a show of friendship, Kim Jong-un rode in a limousine that was reportedly gifted to him by President Putin. The North Korean leader also inaugurated what he calls the world's largest vegetable farm. Welcome news, if true, as North Korea has struggled to feed its people for decades. Just days ago, Kim Jong-Un ordered his military to prepare for war. Now, despite the food crisis, the rogue state continues to threaten the region with nuclear war. And in response, the United States, South Korea, and Japan have pledged to increase their cooperation against Pyongyang. With two wars ongoing, a flare-up in the Korean Peninsula would be catastrophic. And finally, to Haiti, where violence continues to engulf the Caribbean nation, a transition council that was meant to replace Prime Minister Ariel Henry has yet to be announced. Thousands of civilians are at the mercy of armed gangs. And the UN Agency for Children, or UNICEF, says Haiti looks like a scene from the film Mad Max. Will an interim government bring normalcy to Haiti? And at this point, is that even possible? Our next report goes into detail.
Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, continues to burn. Gunshots, vehicles being set ablaze, and lawlessness are a daily sight. This is despite Prime Minister Ariel Henry stepping down. Prime Minister Henry has not yet returned to Haiti. He continues to stay in Puerto Rico. The US has offered him asylum. Meanwhile, Haiti's neighbors are working towards bringing stability in Port-au-Prince. The transition government meant to replace Prime Minister Henry is still being formed. But experts remain uncertain about the effectiveness of the interim government.
Ultimately, the formation of a council, a presidential council, is but one step in a much longer process. And right now it's been taking place with almost total secrecy and a lack of transparency. The only announcements have been made by foreign leaders and in English. So there's really no way for the broader Haitian population to engage in that process in a meaningful way. And that is going to have repercussions because whatever comes out of it is going to face a legitimacy crisis from day one because of the process that has been put in place by those external actors.
With no clear leadership in sight, Haiti continues to spiral into chaos, making the Caribbean nation almost impossible to live in. The UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, has called the situation in Haiti post-apocalyptic, like the scenes from the film Mad Max. This comes after a ship carrying vital aid for civilians was looted by armed gangs.
Ariel Henry resigned, but we are still facing political distress. I want to tell the political players that given what is happening in the country, this country is ours. No one will decide for us. We must take our destiny into our own hands. I want the political players to rise to their tasks and commit themselves to organizing the country.
The situation is not good for us. We get by on the street, but nobody buys our products. We're sorry. We are almost carried away by sleep. The prices of the products are exorbitant. When we are out on the streets, people have turned against us. They don't feel comfortable. They don't live in peace. They can't even sleep at home. They can't send their children to school because they have no money to feed them. When merchants go out into the streets looking for money to feed our children and wives, we find nothing.
Former cop turned gang leader Jimmy Cherizier, who started this chaos, has not been seen in action since Prime Minister Henry stepped down. The international community is watching the violence in Haiti closely. The US has begun sending charter flights to evacuate its citizens. Meanwhile, Haiti's neighbor, the Dominican Republic, is taking a hardline approach. They have increased the presence of security forces at border crossings. Several migrants from Haiti who were working in the Dominican Republic were even deported this weekend. With no end to the violence, Haiti's economy continues to suffer. Businesses have been shut and people are running out of food and water. The Caribbean nation has been left without leadership. Prime Minister Henry has already abandoned Haiti. The gangs are busy fighting amongst each other and thousands of Haitians struggle for survival. It may take years until the situation in Haiti normalizes.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham.